Trudeau botched the vaccine rollout by placing too much faith in China, which is now risking the lives of millions of Canadians. While Ford appeals to Biden for COVID-19 vaccines. This is the Great White North Report.
I'm in love with the system, always all alone. I'm in love with the system. Never go.
Alright, according to Diane Francis from the Financial Post, Canada and the Trudeau government botched the vaccine rollout as a result of Trudeau placing too much faith in China. Now, Trudeau had partnered Ottawa up with China to produce a vaccine. We'll get to that in a minute. Trudeau relying on an unscrupulous and sworn enemy. Though Trudeau doesn't think of China as an enemy, was asking for trouble. I quite agree. I don't know what they were thinking of back then when I first read it. And it is a pretty big scandal, considering we gave them $41 million in foreign aid in 2019. Who knows how much we gave them in 2020. Because there have been delays in people getting vaccinated as quickly as possible, which will cost lives. By the time Trump left office in the United States, they were vaccinating 1 million people a day. How come Canada cannot do that? Because so far we just got 1% of the country has received at least one dose, which puts us behind many other developed countries. 1%, that's it. So you can place the blame directly on Trudeau, the health and procurement ministers who lack experience in either field. This is what happens when you put political appointees in big positions. But this is foreign policy failures. Now they say inherited a naive affection for China's dictatorship that devolved into craven passivity in the face of blackmail. Actually, Trudeau inherited his father's legacy of Pierre Trudeau was the guy who opened up China to Canadian trade. Basically, Trudeau, in order to open up China to trade, he had to recognize the legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party and take that away from the Chinese Nationalist Party in Taiwan. And that opened the door for Canadian companies and investments, which for a time worked, but in the long run it's been damaging to us. And if Trudeau was to go back on that, it would be repudiating his father's legacy. Now, the Trudeau government has been willing to work with the Tianjin-based Chinese Biolab on a COVID-19 vaccine, and this is despite having a contentious relationship with China, with Spavor and Kovrig in jail. The deal collapsed when Chinese authorities blocked exports of vaccine to Canada because they were going to test it. Chinese vaccines are not something you want to test. You won't really want to work to look into. But it seems that from a source, a Chinese businessman who's close to Trudeau suggested that Canada buy vaccines from China. Even the Chinese people don't trust their own vaccines. They're actually buying doses from Pfizer, trying to get Pfizer doses now. Now, supposedly Foreign Affairs Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne was demoted because he's done nothing but capitulate to China. So I do remember that he signed a deal with China-based Chinese Biolab last summer. But you have to remember that any Chinese companies are controlled by the CCP and they're used to further its political ends. Remember when they were giving out all that personal protective equipment, all the masks and stuff to all these countries? And these countries, but the countries could only get them if they praised the Chinese Communist Party, even though they were faulty. Trudeau bought a ton of faulty masks, his government did. So Trudeau, he has to come clean on how this deal fell apart. So we're stuck in a queue behind other countries that held firm deals with Western pharmaceutical companies. It also dropped the ball when it came to creating a Canadian-based pharmaceutical supply chain. Why couldn't we make our own vaccine too? We should have been working closely with the United States or Britain on this one. They pursued a controversial and now delayed $170 million initiative with the National Research Council Lab that was supposed to be ready last November. Industry players were skeptical and believed a better approach would have been to fund private sector companies like biomanufacturer Nuvax or clinical stage pharmaceutical Medicago, both located in Quebec. Exactly. Now we're going to have to wait months. Hell, being a middle-aged white guy, I'm going to wait a couple of years before I'm vaccinated at this rate. And this is because Trudeau lacks good judgment, a health minister without health expertise. So I agree with this article that relying on an unscrupulous sworn enemy like China to provide vital supplies is just asking for trouble. And we should definitely be demanding answers. All opposition parties should demand an inquiry, but with the NDP having a taste of power, they're not gonna bail out on the Liberals just yet. So she brings up that Ottawa's inept vaccine roll is now risking lives, and that Trudeau should bring in the Israelis to sort out his COVID cock-up. The Israelis are way ahead of the game when it comes to... Going back to Chinese Biolab is a Chinese company in Tianjin, and they have previously collaborated with the National Research Council of Canada on vaccine development. Back in 2013, have later worked together to develop an Ebola vaccine. Now, the Trudeau government gave them a whole bunch of money, and we're not seeing any results from it, because they won't. What happened? Our clinical trials were scrapped after China wouldn't ship potential vaccine. It's not approved by Chinese customs to export to Canada. That's what they did to us. They took our money and ran. Took our research that we were helping them with and ran. Chinese company and Halifax research team aimed at carrying out Canada's first clinical trials of a potential vaccine have been abandoned amid rising tensions. This was announced last May. This partnership had been announced last May. I thought it was last June, but close enough. So we were supposed to work with this company to run first Canadian clinical trials for a positive vaccine. Casino's vaccine, called whatever it is, was already being run through human trials in China and has shown promising results. Promising for who? Cannot trust them. They always fudge their numbers. Health Canada gave the go-ahead for Canadian trials to begin and hoped there was that clinical trials could begin within weeks. But by late June, the partnership was on the rocks as the Chinese held up the shipments. The statement said CanSino's collaborators in the Chinese government, the Beijing Institute of Technology, and the Ministry of Science and Technology, which provided funding to CanSino, reviewed the agreement between the NRC and CanSino before it was signed. Subsequent to signing, the government of China introduced process changes regarding shipping vaccines to other countries. The process is not clear to the NCR, but CanSino is now the authority to ship vaccines at this time, so we got screwed. Good work, Trudeau. Another failure in your long list of failures. Ongoing tensions between Canada and China definitely played a role. So, what happens? Trudeau doesn't have any vaccines. We're stuck waiting in line for the Pfizer vaccine and the other one. And Ontario's been really hit hard, especially the Toronto region. And so what happens? Premier Ford gets on TV and appeals to Biden for about 1 million vaccines because he's expressing his frustration about delivery slowdown by the federal government. This is what happens when you let the federal government handle stuff. They screw up. Meanwhile, China's COVID-19 vaccine makers apply to join the COVAX scheme. Love how they put that one in. Yeah, it's a scheme, all right. They want to supply their COVID-19 vaccines to global vaccine sharing scheme COVAX, and the country's first formal move to provide locally developed shots to the initiative. This is led by the World Health Organization, the most trusted of organizations. And it's going to start rolling out vaccines to poor and middle-income countries in February, with 2 to 3 billion doses expected to be delivered this year. I wonder where Canada's just in that scheme. This is why I don't want the Chinese vaccine, because it's only 50% effective, lower than announced earlier. So it's not very effective. And China's going to buy 100 million doses of Pfizer vaccine, snubbing domestic options. Already, they don't trust their own vaccine, but they're handing it out like candy to developing countries. And this is what Trudeau wanted to give us. I'm sorry, but it's time for Trudeau's got to go. He's been a complete failure as Prime Minister, and he's only gotten there on his image and his name. We need a leader that looks out for Canada first and not the world. Any Canadians out there, let me know what you guys think. I don't want to hear from the Chinese trolls. I want to hear from real Canadians. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Hit the like, dislike button, subscribe, and until next time, this has been the Great White North Report.